Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and you all already know how much I love entrepreneurial stories that truly make the world and society a better place. And that's why it's no surprise to me that this year we are featuring so many incredible entrepreneurs within the educational space, because that is deeply meaningful and important work for all of us, because the downstream effects, the upstream effects, it impacts the way that our world works. And that's why I'm so excited to introduce you to an incredible entrepreneur who's doing very important work in this realm. His name is Dave Martelli. Dave is a visionary leader in STEM education with over 20 years of experience designing innovative facilities, creating transformative programs, and building platforms that prepare students for the future. As the founder of Guildhall Learning, and president of Global Educational Advancement, David is on a mission to revolutionize education by equipping educators and institutions with the tools, strategies, and foresight needed to meet the demands of today's learners and prepare them for the opportunities of tomorrow. And I would imagine in a world where AI is rapidly progressing and technology is going crazy, Dave's job has become even more important in preparing tomorrow's leaders. So I'm excited to learn from him. I'm excited to hear how his entrepreneurial mind works. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Dave Martelli. All right, Dave, I am so very excited to be joined by a fellow New Englander here in today's episode. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Super cool opportunity. Hope it'll be a fun conversation.
Heck yes. And when you get two extroverts together, who knows where the heck we're going to go. So first things first, take us beyond the bio. Who's Dave? How'd you start doing all this important work?
So my background in as a kid actually was I was really good at being bad at basically everything. So as you imagine in a traditional school system, that means that I failed almost every school I've ever attended. Once I got beyond kind of the standard grade school, high school, starting to get into college, I really started having a passion both for building businesses, because there's something that I could do kind of on my own. And it's something that I had, it was an interesting problem to solve. How do you get the people that you want to find that you can help the best? And then how do you make the resources available to them in a way that they understand and that they can really take action on? Over the time, I ended up getting a bunch of interesting jobs, everywhere from high-level positions at startups all the way to eventually Northrop and the Department of Defense. And what I was noticing is I failed quite a bit of my educational experience, but I was having pretty good outcomes. And a lot of the people that were much better off in school system were having not quite as nice outcomes, and they were a lot of times very sad with their life. So I thought that was a really interesting question. So I decided, why not structure a lot of my life around trying to figure out why that is and how I can maybe help with it.
Yeah, I love that overview, especially because you started with failure. And that's something that we all need to embrace as entrepreneurs. It makes me think, I think so frequently, I think it's an Albert Einstein quote where he said, if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life thinking it's an idiot. And Dave, you and I, we're entrepreneurs at heart. That would never be able to be taken out of us. And I know that so many people feel that way as well. I wish I was introduced to these, it's funny saying alternative paths because it has become much more popular now, but I feel like we were only told one way forward. Get a job, work for 40 years after we get a bachelor's degree. There were like so many rules that we were taught on that not everybody fits that mold. So I'm super curious to hear your perspective on the entrepreneurial level, but also with that educational hat on of what's the state of the educational space today? You clearly want to make it better. What does that look like to you?
So I've had a lot of interesting conversations recently with universities and nonprofits that are trying really hard to get kids that don't necessarily have the greatest outlooks based off of either their socio-economic status or just what they have around them. Maybe they're neurodivergent, all those things. And when talking to some of the universities, there's a lot in micro-credentialing that's going on right now. So alternative pathways, right? So you can get certifications, you can go over and get badges, Coursera, all of those kind of things to kind of level up your own personal skills. Colleges traditionally seem to be against a lot of that, at least the majority of the kind of indentured ones. And the reason ends up being is because Coursera and all these other things are accessible to everyone. And that means that kind of they feel the type of student that's getting in there isn't traditionally what they would believe to be of a high enough standard. The other problem that they're having is that it's traditionally schools are looking for kind of competencies versus skills. So if I get a computer science degree, that shows that I have some competency in computer science, but it's very, very hard to track back the skill pathway that led me there. And it's obviously very diverse depending on what school you go to and kind of what pathway you take within your school. So all of these kind of things that are popping up with skill-based versus competency-based, a lot of the universities are saying, I want people to be able to work really hard towards the, not necessarily practical knowledge, but work really hard towards the theoretical knowledge so that they can build more knowledge. And if you want to be a researcher, that is amazing. Like, there needs to be researchers in this world right now, right? There's medical research, there's AI research is huge right now, and you have to have that really strong theoretical baseline in maths, in computer science, and engineering, and circuit hardware, right? So all of that is really good, but there's an entire class of people that want to have a technical skill level. They want to be able to go and kind of get right to the point of saying, this is kind of what I want to do, or maybe I don't want to know what I want to do, but I want to be able to start moving and playing around with it so that I can really start understanding what these landscapes look like from a practical skills-based working environment. And that's what's lacking a little bit right now, but what is the biggest demand seems to be for right now. And colleges are having a hard time keeping up with that. For a lot of reasons.
Yeah, I would imagine that they are. And I would argue, I'm obviously very biased here, but I would argue it's because amazing entrepreneurs like you are bringing real life things to the marketplace faster than traditional educational institutions can. So, Dave, I would love for you to introduce Guildhall Learning to our listeners, because obviously I've seen the work that you're doing. You kind of teased a little bit about your different programs and more practical. I'm also going to interject. I love that STEM has become STEAM these days: science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. So, Dave, introduce listeners to Guildhall Learning.
So, Guildhall Learning was kind of my my throw out there to the world testing platform to figure out how a new model of education could exist that keeps skills and student individuality at the forefront. So a little bit of background. I used to be the head of computer science and engineering for a school, but the school was from 3 years old up to high school, right? So it was younger kids. And one of the things that I tried doing as an experiment with them, and they were very much on this because they were a very forward-thinking school, was how do I make it so every single kid has a completely individualized curriculum pathway. Not all of them are doing the same projects, not even all of them are learning the same thing, but I can still track that, right? Me as a person was able to do that for at least a little while up until COVID striked, and trying to do all of that over Zoom turned out to be very impossible. I just didn't have the tools necessary to just look at all of their projects and whatnot. So that sounded like a great software startup. So as you do, I built up a small team of software engineers, and we started building a software. So Guild itself actually stands for Guided Universal Intelligent Learning Device. It's meant to be an AI system that individualizes each system, finds out all of the resources that they have available to them to continue on the pathway learning what they are the most into, while still hitting all of the rubrics and all of the requirements to be able to say that they're working in our STEAM class, our computer science and engineering class. We ended up releasing it after about 6 months to about 6 countries, about 12 different schools testing, and it worked in about 20% of them, which was actually a little bit more than I expected. One of the problems is that there are too many variables for us to be able to control. In Argentina, school has different resources and different limitations than a United States school. So right at the end of the COVID pandemic, my wife actually runs schools. She runs daycares and elementary schools. So we're like, hey, why don't we take our resources, put them together, and make kind of an enclave for us to be able to test these things and limit our variables, figure out what systems actually could work, and then kind of expand from there, right? So we started off building out the software and the hardware, making a big shop that's got wood shop, metal shop. It's got VR and AR, jewelry labs, 3D printing, all this cool equipment that kids can come in. And we individually interview every single kid that comes in and say, hey, what are you into? What are you terrified of and don't want to touch with a 10-foot stick? And then how do we figure out your pathway? And over time, we give them the resources to be able to bend their pathway to their will, while we're kind of making sure they're continuing to go forward. That was kind of the beginning of it. Now we've gotten to the point where we've structured that. The main question that I had was, I know I can run it, can other people? So we hired a bunch of instructors, and I got out of the teaching seat for a little while and started looking and doing more like podcasts and doing more outreach to other schools and whatnot. Turns out that other teachers could also successfully do this. It wasn't just me. I'm not that special. And then now we're working on bringing it into other schools. So now we work with educational institutions to train people on this methodology. We work with large nonprofits to handle massive events of hundreds and hundreds of kids all doing STEM-related activities. And I love that you brought up that they're bringing in art, STEAM, because I can have the best app in the world, but if it doesn't look good and it doesn't feel good and intuitive to me as a human to want to use, then I will probably never use it. So therefore, having that art component in there really brings the humanities and the human nature into the engineering work that we do so that people actually want to work with it, right? So we put all of that into our app design that hopefully the kids will go out, use, and be able to make their own learning paths on their own in their own spare time, and then come to us also, right? So right now we're really building it out, trying to get in front of as many large organizations as we can to test more and figure out more how we can help as many kids, as many types of kids as possible. And so far it's been super successful. People have been now finding us, which is cool.
I love this, honestly, so much. To me, this is the quintessential view of how entrepreneurship positively impacts the world, because it's deeply meaningful work that you do. I obviously always have my business hat on, and I can't help but think in business terms. And I'm hearing you talk about so many different stakeholders who are all aligned in your mission, which is the students probably get so excited. Gosh, I wish you were operating in Massachusetts when I was a kid. I imagine that the teachers, it's so rewarding for them to see their students doing things that light them up. I would imagine that educational institutions that want to provide this experience for their students, this is a match made in heaven. And of course, the nonprofits who share these missions as well can help you bring this to life. Then where my head goes from stakeholders is the so-called competition. It's the one concept in business I've never really agreed with, because I don't think we really have competition, but who is viewing it as competition? Are the schools totally on board? What are those conversations looking like? Because I would also imagine, Dave, that this is a bit disruptive of an approach that you're bringing.
Yes. What's kind of fun about it? So personally, I don't believe in competition. It's a weird thought that I have when you're dealing with children, right? It's hard to think like a business person because you care about these kids, right? So you'll make like what I would consider probably pretty dumb financial decisions to make sure that you can support those kids. At the other half of it, you have to make sure that you have a viable product that can continue to grow and continue to iterate, right? So having the kids involved in it, that helps. They know that they're having an active role in developing the business, right? And I encourage them to help and come to me with ideas and what's working and what's not as best as I can, and as much as they are comfortable with it. So that's helping. For me, so with that vein, I want more competition, because that means that it will get out there sooner, and it will the surrounding ecosystem to support this sort of stuff will be more readily available, right? So like I'm building out AI tools, right? I don't have the time to develop all of the infrastructure that NVIDIA has brought out to be able to train systems on everything that I would need them to do, right? So the fact that they exist helps me move forward faster, right? If more curriculum companies come involved and start doing this, that helps me because there's more test data going out, right? There's more proof so that more people feel confident and comfortable seeking solutions such as myself, right? There is an unimaginable amount of people in this world, right? So I'm not so worried about me having a problem with competition. I'm more worried that not enough people are aware that this is even an option, or not enough people feel confident taking this as an option because they need the notoriety, they need the proven examples, right? So I hope more people get into it. We've been working. I had a conversation with a New Hampshire university last week, and they know on the digital badging front, right, the micro-credentialing front, what would really help the students. But they're such a large organization that they're having a very hard time convincing their stakeholders and the uppers of the university to even be able to say yes to what they all know and believe would be a great way forward, just because the proof isn't there yet, right? So more competition would be nice. That's maybe weird to say, but that's kind of my opinion on that.
Yeah, honestly, Dave, it's part of why I admire your work so much, because I admire the entrepreneurial mindset behind all of it. Of course, it's an abundance mindset rather than scarcity, and I think that this is part of that new wave of education, is learning that. It's one of the earliest business lessons I've learned. I started when I was a freshman in college. I was in classrooms during the day where my professors would tell me to be wary of our competition, and then in the evening, it was my competition that was accelerating my success and giving me access to things. And I think that that's such an important entrepreneurial lesson continuing down this business path, because I love the fact that you also equally love business. It's such a cool part of the way that you think. Who's your customer? When you plot out the biggest way that you can make a change in the educational world, who are those key stakeholders that you're talking to that have that ability to sign off and say, wait, hold on, Dave, please implement this. This is going to serve our students.
So during COVID, it started off as teachers. It's very specifically every engineering teacher and coding teacher was having trouble teaching what they were doing because they couldn't be in front of their kids. So when we put out the feeler to get a dozen or so schools out, we filled up our spots in, I think it was 2 days or something like that. And we weren't even really trying, right? So that was our initial. After we realized that we had some work to do before we could get a product out that would be as useful to them as what we believed it should be, we turned it into almost like an after-school program so that we can test more. So with that phase, we're like, our primary goal is to get as many students in here as possible. The easiest way for us to do that, as it turns out, has been approaching nonprofits and Boston public schools and libraries and everything like that, because we ourselves can bring in, I don't know, like 50 kids a day or something like that to our programs, and we have memberships so they can keep coming in. But we can impact the most people by going out to where those kids already are, which is obviously in schools, libraries, and programs. So our target market very quickly shifted into finding as many large organizations that were doing good work with a variety of types of kids, so different nonprofits for different types of kids usually, and then reaching out to them and saying, hey, we love what you're doing here. Right. And we do research them to make sure they're doing good work, that they're reputable, and they're not just like trying to grab money from every place they can possibly go. They have a mission that they care about. Right. We love that you're doing this work. You have a gap in what you can offer right here because you don't have anyone in your organization that specializes in that. We would love to come in and see if we're a good fit so that we can enhance your program is in this way, which will, from your perspective, make it so that you're offering more things that are in the need right now. STEM and STEAM is huge right now, especially with the amount of AI research and discoveries that are happening just in the last 2 years. So we help them by giving them a massive capability that they can then market to gain more kids that will be aligned with what they're trying to do. And then we also benefit because we find more kids that are into what we're trying to do, and then we recruit them into our programs as well with that. Over time now we're trying to get into schools also, but that's the next step.
Yeah, Dave, adding on to that, you brought up the word mission. I'll be fully transparent with you here while we're together on the air is that even before I had the chance to speak with you today, one thing that was very clear to me is that you are a big thinker. And I think that you have a unique ability. I interview entrepreneurs for a living, and so I see work every single day. It seems to me from the outside like you have a really unique ability to zoom in and also out. It just seems like you have a very big vision for your business, but at the same time, you're able to make those small steps. And I know as an entrepreneur for 16 years now how paralyzing big visions can be because we want all of the things and we want to do them right now. And we all are crazy workaholics and we have the ability to act on so many different things. Talk to me about your executive mindset. I want to get into that founder brain of yours and understand how you think about that big picture and that big mission that you have, the big dreams that you have, but balancing it with the day-to-day and the execution.
So I'm going to give credit where credit due, and bring up my wife for a moment. So my wife, I laugh. We both started our first business type things when we were about 12. So she grew up in Russia, moved here about 20-something, 30-something years ago. And she started a syndicated, actually, a television program for following kids that are making big waves in their community. And I started a printing company where I made business cards and stuff like that, right? And by the end of it, every single person, including all the superintendents of the schools, all had my business cards and stationery. Anyways, she is the kind of grounded, aggressive day-to-day side of what we do, whereas I'm a lot of the big vision of what we do. To tell you how much this runs deep within our relationship, on our third date, we founded Global Educational Advancement, the nonprofit you mentioned, and we kind of went from there. So we grew as a relationship, as also business partners at exactly the same time in tandem. For me, I tend to think of vectors of growth. So I, in my mind, see a scaffolding required to make it so that there is educational opportunity and resources for all types of learners that have the ability to individualize based off of each special case that is each student, right? While also looking at where's the industry is going and, what will likely be needed in, 5 years for skills, right? So what I try to do is look at that big overarching thought, right? And I will it down to what I have access to right at the moment, right? So when I was a teacher, the thing I had access to was kids directly in front of me. All right, so let's start testing what I have from there. And as it grows, I say, okay, the next big step that I need is to see if other people can do this, right? Other teachers. So now is the time to start a physical location and hire a bunch of teachers to see if they do it. Okay, and the next step on that is, can those teachers then go out into other programs that are not ours? And then what is required for scaffolding for other schools or other libraries or whatever to be able to run the kind of programs that we're trying to build. And we just build the scaffolding out as the reach increases, right? As far as the real, like, day-to-day, the bio that you read, right? All of that, my wife partners with me for a lot of those things to be able to make sure that, kind of slap me in the back of the head a little bit to say, hey, I know you want to build out this big AI system that will be able to gamify the entire process. That is a 2-year program, and we have rent tomorrow. So let's see how we grow our program to make sure that we have the money to be able to support that. And from a business and spreadsheet kind of perspective, I've never met anyone that's faster at making good decisions than her, right? So that has been. I would argue that anyone that wants to build anything big, it's impossible for you to be able to do that on your own. So I would find a co-founder, find a person that can be the opposite side of your brain, where you both have the same vision, right? But you can balance each other out and be okay arguing with them. It's, because that's all a part of it, but know that you're really trying to achieve the same thing, right? And that those skirmishes and all of the happiness and together, that's all a part of it, right? And yeah, that's it. It's just starting with where you are and then tracing the path to where you want to be and being okay wiggling around as you go as opportunities present themselves.
Yeah, really well said, Dave. I can't tell if you were talking about business or marriage there, because luckily for you, you've got both. And huge shout out to your wife. I think that's a great example of true in-house talent that you have at your disposal. So huge kudos to both of you for the way that you think and the way that you execute together. That is so at the core of all these things that you're sharing with us today. I knew that time would fly by, but we have to talk about AI. So I do want to bring that up in today's conversation, because anytime I've got a 7-year-old niece and nephew, and they have computer class, and I always wonder when they're going to be introduced to this wonderful world of AI, aside from just talking to the apps that I let them play around with from there. But I would imagine middle school, high school, college, those have changed so much because of AI. Talk to us about where the heck we are in the world of education with AI.
A lot of people are very scared about it. I'm not, in full transparency, there's not a lot about it that kind of freaks me out, but I also try to work with it on a daily basis. From a student perspective, there's some things that I think AI probably shouldn't be used for. So if I have a essay that says, tell me, write about your opinion about, Christopher Columbus or something like that, right? If I go directly to ChatGPT and I say, write me an essay about that, and I hand it in, I am not being honest. That's not my opinion. That's ChatGPT's opinion, right? If I scaffold something and I say, hey, this is all of my thoughts about it, can you make this more elegant, right? Maybe that's okay, depending on what you're going for. But for when a student is asked to speak from their experience in their heart and their place, I think AI shouldn't necessarily be used for that, outside of maybe researching a couple of dates they might not remember. Where it should be used and be used more is for the practical skill-based projects. So I think it is less valuable for me to teach you a programming language and then tell you to make the same runner game or Flappy Bird game that I have made, and you will now learn how to make this one Flappy Bird game. I think that's really good at teaching you a couple of basics about programming language that will likely change soon anyways, and it teaches you that one specific programming language that you probably might not use in your actual career if you chose to, right? It'll only teach you how to do that one kind of enclave thing, right? AI is really good and allows me to be able to go to a student and say, hey, I want you to create a video game. I don't care what you use for a programming language. I don't care what tools you use in order to create this. I only care that you figure out how to do it. I, as a teacher, will be here when you get stuck, and I want to help you along that. But this is turning into an exercise of, how do I ask the right questions? How do I find the tools that I need to be able to make the thing that I want to make, right? And then how do I gain the resiliency when it doesn't work the first 5 times I try to make it, right? So in that case, AI knows potentially where to go. I can ask it, hey, how do I make a database that can hold all my top scores for my game, right? And that allows each student to, instead of learning a programming language, allows each student to learn how to create something that happens to be using a programming language, right? And that is more like what they'll likely see in the world moving forward. So just like an encyclopedia is a tool to look up some information, right? And that encyclopedia holds the information that I need for the specific question that the teacher is asking me. Now the teacher has the ability to ask a substantially more broad question, and you can use AI to research the specifics of that question without worrying if you have the right type of book or encyclopedia or whatnot hanging around, right, for that kid to access. So it really starts bringing, what the kids really should be training in my opinion, is how do I start asking good questions. How do I start breaking down my problems into modular steps so that I can figure out how to build things step by step? And then how do I solve problems using this technology that wasn't available 2 years ago, right? And the difficult thing that educational institutions are going to have a hard time with, a difficult thing that teachers are going to have a hard time, is figuring out where that line is between I want the kid to tell me and speak from the heart and speak from their experience, right? Versus I need this kid to learn a skill. How do I teach them how to learn that skill on their own, right? Technology is moving so fast. They can't possibly right now, especially in grade school, they can't teach the kids what will be relevant and needed by the time they graduate high school. It's impossible, right? So everything works exponentially from growth on that, right? So use the tool as a tool. Right.
Yeah. Dave, they probably can't even teach what's going to be relevant 6 months from now by the time they go on to the next grade. So super interesting hearing the way you think about these things. I hope that every single educator is listening, and I know that they are through what you're doing with Guildhall. So I'm excited to drop those links on listeners in just a minute. But before we get there, I want you to put your entrepreneurial hat on, because not only are you a subject matter expert, you are one of us. You are a fellow entrepreneur. So with that hat on, what's your best piece of advice? Knowing that we're being listened to by both wantrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own business growth journeys, what's that one piece of advice you want to leave them with today?
Just do the thing. Don't worry about messing up. You're going to mess up no matter what anyways. So figure out the minimum viable product, figure out the smallest thing that you can do, and get it out in front of people as fast as you can. As you just mentioned, you can't even predict what's going to happen 6 months from now, right? So the technology will just grow so fast you can't keep up with it. A customer's needs will grow so fast that you can't keep up with it. If you don't get something out there as fast as you can, you'll just keep rewriting and revisiting the exact same thing over and over again, and you'll never get it out there, right? Be okay and know that messing up an iteration and feeling bad, right? That's part of the process. No one cares if you're scared, right? Except for you. So just put it out there. That's the only way you'll help people. And everyone here, every entrepreneur, right? They're out there to help people, right? So not doing that is selfish. I'll even go that far, right? So you owe it to yourself and everybody else.
Yes, I love that advice. Listeners, just to give you full transparency on how much Dave embodies this in his own life and in his own business, we always ask our guests before we get together, we always ask them, what's your zone of genius? What's something that you're really good at that's part of your secret sauce? Dave very transparently wrote, I'm really good at being really bad at things. And I love that, Dave. I love how much it's encompassed in the advice that you're leaving our listeners with. And I'm very excited for listeners to see the work that you're doing with Guildhall. Not only because I'm biased and I love the fact that you're doing it throughout my home state of Massachusetts, but because seeing it is really powerful. Seeing the kids behind the computers, envisioning things, building things. You've said the word build quite a few times during our conversation today, and I think that that's so inherent in entrepreneurs and literally anyone who changes the way or changes the world in positive ways is that builder spirit. So for listeners who want to see this stuff and be part of the amazing work that you're doing, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
You can find more about Guildhall Learning at Guildhall, Guildhall, learning.com. You can find more information about me on the socials at Dave Martelli, DaveMartelli, on X, on Facebook, on Instagram, on all of those, and Guildhall Learning on all the same.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find all of those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Super easy, guildhalllearning.com. You can click right on through. We're also linking to Dave's personal LinkedIn in the show notes, so definitely click right on through from those links down below. Otherwise, Dave, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great.